stars are calling me, telling me to come home.
Ever since I was able to remember when I first looked up at the sky, I knew something was off. My parents didn't allow us to watch a lot of TV when we were younger. We only played outside or inside with our toys. Now that I am 19 years old, my mother decided to tell me some stories when I was little. At the age of 4, I apparently had told her that I wanted to go in space. Everyone would think of this as something silly and not to worry about it. But my mother did when she asked a simple why. My 4-year-old self had told her that the stars were calling me, telling me to come home. Around 2007, when I was 8 years old, my space obsession became worse. I looked up all the planets and stars in the library. My father told my mother that it was a thing kids did and not to worry about it. She did believe him, but I asked her once if she saw the tall man in the hallway a few days ago. My father, who doesn't like to see me afraid, sad, worried, yelled at me to never talk about that again. Since that day, I am not able to remember a lot of things. This is where the scary parts come in. I've never seen the face of an alien when I was little on a computer or TV. I did know how they looked like though. I'm able to even remember that I stood in a white room, a big, large window that made it easier for me to see the stars. It was beautiful, but I wasn't panicking at all. Not even when the tall man appeared to take my hand and lead me somewhere else. It was as if I had a strange connection with that thing. And now, I'm not able to sleep peacefully as I did when I was little. I'm terrified of the dark for an unknown reason, and aliens are starting to scare me. I don't know what is going on and why I have been like this. The funniest thing, what my parents always tell me, is that they picked the wrong baby from the hospital. I don't look like them at all. I'm very pale and my eyes are big, almond-shaped. No one has this in my family. Of course, it isn't something to worry about, but I want to know what kind of connections I have to that tall alien. I have to cut this short as I do not have much time. I wish to tell more. I apologize for my English. This isn't my first language. Yesterday, I wasn't able to sleep peacefully, as I hoped so. I used anything to distract myself, and even ended up watching some comedy on Netflix. I suddenly grew tired around 9 p.m. and decided it was time to sleep. School will be starting on Monday again, and it was a great idea to sleep early since I have to wake up very early. Ever since I was little, I always have my back face the wall and stay as close as possible to the wall. My door is always closed, since I do not like to have it open and it feels like someone is watching me. I woke up after a while. My room had become so cold that I was starting to shiver. What seemed way too strange is that I was able to see my own breath. Around February, it gets very cold in my country, but never has my house been that cold. I tried to sit up to grab a blanket, but once my eyes moved to the door, I saw that it was open. My parents never check up on me, as they do know that I don't like it. Immediately, I was scared and tried my best to stay as calm as possible. The only thing that came to my mind, it had to be one of my little brothers, who decided to grab some money from me. The thought made me want to roll my eyes, but it had calmed me down. As I finally sat up and walked over to my door to close it, the sudden fear of someone watching me quickly washed over me. I immediately ran for the door and closed it, turning on the small lamp I have on my desk. My eyesight isn't that great, and I thought that I scared myself because I couldn't see a thing. the little lamp made it easier for me to recognize figures and objects around my room. The feeling of a large hand pressing on my back made me freeze. I could feel the icy touch of a hand, and at first, I thought someone had broken into my house. But if it was a burglar, they would try to knock me out or hide until I went back to bed. Turning around, I expected to see nothing and hoped that there was nothing. Right in front of me stood a very tall grey humanoid figure with a transparent-like coat on. I didn't dare look up at its face. Its body was very thin, way too thin for a human. What made me panic even more was the shape of its hand. There were 4 long fingers. It did try to reach out for me again, but that was when I decided to look up at the creature. It had such a long, thin neck, and the chest showed me some weird bones. It wasn't bones, but some type of tight skin wrapped around it. I'm not even sure if it was bones. The mouth was very thin, almost like someone drew a small line on it. The face sent shivers down my spine. What seemed to be a chin seemed to be very pointy and thin. Its black, insect-like eyes made me back up to the door, not being able to remove myself from it or even take a run. I was so scared as I had no idea what was going on. But I did know what it was. They have appeared literally almost everywhere in this time. Let it be from TV, music videos, or even games. This was a well-known alien. My body was screaming for me to run. I did the best thing I could do around that time. Ignoring the scary tall alien, I kicked my books off the table. The alien seemed to be confused or even shocked, probably thinking, why did I do that? But I knew just who to alarm before things would go bad. I heard the familiar footsteps of my father, laughing softly as I stared at the alien's black eyes. It didn't move at all, but it seemed like the thing was floating, and slowly, it suddenly glowed and disappeared before my father was able to open the door and see what was happening. I didn't explain what happened to him and told him that I bumped against the desk. He did ask me why I was sleeping so early. Apparently, it had only been 9:27 p.m. Whatever that thing wanted from me, it wasn't something good. Tonight, I refuse to sleep alone in my room. I don't feel safe at all. This isn't my first encounter with those beings. I've had a few encounters with them so far, and it only left me confused and freaked out. I apologize for my bad English, as it isn't my first language. My parents decided it was a good idea to send me off to a small vacation with my grandparents to Turkey. They thought it was a great idea to have myself relax after such a stressful year. I went to a doctor after my first experience, thanks to my parents, who only send me to a therapist to see if something is wrong with me. So far, no one believes me for what I've seen, but that doesn't stop me from believing it. My grandparents have this small house in a village. The closest neighbor is kilometers away, which makes it almost impossible to visit someone else. However, there are barely any trees. It's always very hot around June, and sleeping at night seems way more difficult than people think. My grandparents were already sleeping, and since there was nothing to watch on TV, I decided to call an end to the day and sleep outside. Of course, I didn't actually go outside, but used the balcony instead, as I did not want to wake up with a snake around me. Getting down from the balcony is just asking for broken bones. I grabbed some pillows and a few blankets after I turned the lights on. Sleeping in the dark isn't really something I enjoy a lot, not after the many experiences I've had. The light seemed more for my own comfort than anything else, but I already could feel something was off. It was suddenly colder outside than it was a minute ago, and this awful feeling of being watched started to make me paranoid. I quickly looked back inside, but I saw nothing and shrugged it off, thinking I was making myself paranoid. That was, at least, what I had really thought. Once my eyes traveled down to the garden, I saw something way too familiar, but my eyes never betray me for what I've seen and the light I had. Below me stood a very tall, greyish-white tall grey. It was very tall and skinny. I'm not really sure how tall, but definitely taller than an average human. Its shoulders were very thin, and the arms reached to its knees. But to make it a bit clearer, it literally looked like those toys you could stretch, mostly their limbs. All it did was stare at me, and I stared back at it. I'm not sure how long this lasted, but when I blinked my eyes, the creature was all of a sudden a bit closer than it was before. That's when I knew that it knew I was there. I was frozen with fear, and the alien moved its head a bit to the side, only to move it back straight again, as if it was curious to see me. After a bit, I finally got the courage to do something. Instead of freaking out like I always did, I thought it was a better idea to react calmly. The first thing I did was wave my hand slowly at it, only to have the same response back after a few minutes. As much as I tried to not freak out, I only became even more scared. I asked what it was doing here, but that was when I felt my whole body becoming stiff. My mind was telling me to scream for help, someone to come and get this creature away. I knew one thing for sure: it wanted something from me, something I had no idea of what it could be. I asked the creature again why it was here, and the only reaction I got was it moving its head to the side, as if it was curious. The alien moved a bit closer, standing right beneath me, looking up at me with those big black eyes. I wasn't able to see a mouth before, but now I could. I was shaking in fear, not knowing why it was standing this close. A loud voice of a man called for me, asking what I was doing on the balcony in the middle of the night. My eyes quickly moved to the police officer of the village, who was always driving around at night. However, once my eyes met the officer's, I quickly looked back down, only to see that the alien had disappeared. The officer saw how alarmed I was, as it was easy to see that I was shaking and nearly at the point of falling on my knees. All I did was say that something was in the garden, and that's when the officer quickly entered the garden to check if someone was there. However, he told me he saw nothing and called a few other officers to check the surroundings. My grandparents were woken up by them and told them what happened. However, my grandfather, who has a bit of an obsession with aliens, asked me many questions about the alien I'd seen. It seems to me like this isn't the first time it has happened at all, and that has been common in our family that encounters like this happened. But what I did learn was that my grandfather was, or still is, an abductee. This happened in the middle of the night at my mum's house some years back in Northern California. I was asleep on the floor in the living room. Next to the living room is a room that can be seen through 2 large windows and French doors. We call it the middle room. Next to that was my mum and stepdad's bedroom. The light in the middle room was left on, partly dimmed at nights. I woke up and saw 3 short grey aliens walking around in the middle room. They were about 5 feet tall, had long skinny arms and were wearing dark coloured jumpsuits. The arms stood out to me the most because of how thin they were, with no muscle tone like you would see in a human. The eyes looked solid black and were larger than a human's, though not as large as shown in some depictions. I don't remember about the nose and mouth, other than those features were small and not noticeable. I don't remember any details about the hands. I was able to sit up part way as I was watching them, but I had no energy to do anything else. They didn't seem to notice that I was watching them. Within a couple of minutes, I fell back to sleep. I'm guessing that they transmit something to keep everyone passed out, but Sometimes that doesn't always work 100%. Here's the kicker. In the morning, my mum walked in and said the aliens were there the night before. I then told her that I saw them too, and I asked her how many there were and what they looked like. Her description matched what I had seen. She's had other alien encounters, but this was the only time there was a witness. This was a few years ago, but it's really stuck with me, just for how strange it was. Anyway, I was heading out of my house at around 6 a.m. It was summer, so I took my walks at sunrise to avoid the daytime heat. I had done this many times and had my walk down to a science. Just my muscle memory could get me through. So shortly after leaving my home, I'm heading up this road towards the highway. I lived behind a school, so I was very aware of the roads and vehicles, even if I was distracted by something else, which I was. As I walked down this road, I was going through my playlists on my MP3 player. I was almost right on the first intersecting road by the time I found what I wanted to listen to and looked up. Everything was normal and there were no cars to be seen, which made sense as it was a Saturday morning. So I continued up towards the highway where there was a sidewalk. But about 3 intersections from the highway, I noticed a shadow on the school zone sign ahead of me. Figuring it was mine, I just kept walking. I was only 2 intersections away when a disturbing thought hit me. I was walking east. There was no way that shadow belonged to me. And since there was absolutely no one around, there was no way on earth that that shadow was really a shadow. And as if it could read my thoughts and sudden fear, a figure stepped out into the intersection right behind the school. And the only thing I can figure it was a grey alien. It had all the features: spindly limbs, enormous head, gigantic black eyes, and barely a nose, ears, or lips to speak of. For anyone else, this would have been the time to panic and run, but my military training kicked in. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it wanted, but I knew it had no place this close to my home and my children. So I charged at it, hoping at the very least to run it off, or better still, find some way to capture it. Of course, under both of these desires, I wanted to kill it. To this day, I don't know why I wanted to kill it. Maybe it was part of my training that had stuck into my brain. Or maybe it was because this being was undoubtedly a threat. At least, in my mind. I don't think aliens come all the way to our neck of the intergalactic woods just to hide behind signs. There was something going on here and I had to fix it. The next thing I know, I'm standing in the intersection. The creature was gone. Naturally, I was confused. The sun was higher than it should have been, and a quick glance at my MP3 player showed that I'd missed at least 10 songs. By my best guess, I was missing nearly half an hour of time. Now, scared and disorientated, I turned back and walked home. It was already getting hot and heat stroke was not going to help me sort out everything that had just happened. I haven't told this story to anyone other than my parents and a single friend. We all agree that this was something strange, and that whatever it was definitely not right. Even now, years on, I wonder what I really saw. Was it really an alien? Did I honestly try to capture and kill an actual extraterrestrial? I don't have those answers, and that scares me. But one thing is, I don't think I got abducted. I don't have weird dreams, and I couldn't find any mysterious marks anywhere on my body. The only thing that I can't explain is a painful feeling in my upper left arm. It feels like there is something in there, but x-rays have shown nothing. Could it be that I was tagged by this creature in the same way we tag animals for study? And that scares the daylights out of me. This pain has not gone away, but I have become accustomed to it. Maybe one day, I'll be able to get better scans of my arm and see if maybe a different machine could see what the x-rays couldn't. I was driving home with my brother between 12 and 2 a.m. I had just gotten on the highway, and in the middle divider of the road, my headlights shined on a giant man, at least 8 to 9 feet tall, and his skin was all charcoal grey. He wasn't broad. I could see his body because it looked like he was wearing a large black trench coat or cloak of some kind. But I'd imagine he would have been around 200 to 250 pounds from how his head looked. He also had red glowing eyes, which seemed like they glowed on their own and weren't just reflecting my headlights, since I could still see them once my lights were no longer shining on him. I was driving at least 50 to 60 miles per hour, so I only saw him for a few seconds. It almost looked like he was shocked to see me and was shuffling back into the bushes. But he was almost as tall as them. The way he walked creeped me out the most. He was sidestepping, but they were really fast, really short steps, like if you had to walk with your pants around your ankles, or were a penguin or something. I yelled, and my brother, who was laying back in his seat, sat up, looked over and also yelled. We were both rattled, but kept on driving home. This was in Oakland, California, in August 2017. To preface, my dad was a staunch believer in UFOs, aliens, anything paranormal. He figured we, my 2 younger brothers and I, needed to know about this stuff, so he told us all kinds of stories growing up. It scared the shit out of all of us and still affects us to this day. We're all in our 30s now. When I was in my late teens, early 20s, I lived with my dad. He lived in a trailer that was 3 bedrooms. I smoked cigarettes at the time, and the rule was that I was allowed to smoke in the living room at night, but not in my room, because the smoke would make it to his room and wake him up. That's important for later. He had built a 3-way bunk bed for us that was still in the house. The middle bunk faced out from the other 2, and there was about 3 to 4 feet of space under it. That was my bunk. It was situated in such a way that if I was laying on my back, the door was directly behind my head, with just enough room for the door to close. I hope I'm painting the picture right. Anyway, one night I'm watching TV in my room. It's late, so I turned everything off and lay down to sleep. I don't recall how long it was until I heard the noises. I begin to hear what sounds like footsteps go up the hallway behind me, back and forth, back and forth. Then, light tapping on the walls along with the footsteps. Then they stop, directly behind me in the doorway to my bedroom. Then I hear something run into my room and under my bed. To say I was terrified is an understatement. I wanted my dad awake, but was too scared to yell or anything like that. So I grabbed my pack of cigarettes from the TV stand that was close enough to the bed that I didn't have to move much. I lit up and started blowing the smoke into the hallway. Luckily, my dad woke up yelling at me for smoking in my room. The next day I explained why I smoked in my room, and he was fine with it, but didn't understand why I was scared. That was my dad, though. To this day, I can still remember that night like it was yesterday. Hello watchers and listeners, thank you so much for watching. A huge thank you to all the Reddit users who kindly allowed me to use their stories. I couldn't do this without you. And of course, thank you to all of those who continue to support me. I truly do appreciate it so much. And remember,
Papa loves you.